Thank you, Matt. I've been a fan of Matt's for coming up on 10 years now, and as some of you heard last time I was here, I finally have gotten to be among you and see him in action a little bit and meet all of you, and my respect and admiration only rise. Congratulations to this new member class. You have chosen well. I love the way that you engage with one another. I love the array of things that you do in order to reach out to the world. I love the music. I love a lot about what this church is, and this weekend I love how you are engaging one another across your differences. I also thank you for sitting through that long reading. It's kind of important to get it on the table, but I think Matt may be out of voice by now just by having read that part of 1 Corinthians. The second reading is there for two reasons. One, I have a bucket list that includes preaching passages that no other preachers preach. And I can check that one off. But secondly, you'll see during the sermon, I hope, a reason for it being there. So I'm blessed to be among you. Will you pray with me? May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. I begin this morning with an admission that you may actually find a bit blasphemous. You see, I am a worship groupie. I've been worshiping since I was tiny, and straight on through there have been not many clusters of more than 1 or 2 weeks when I haven't been in a worship service. I love the music, I love the preaching and the teaching and the reading and the prayers, and I'm a worship junkie, but there is one part of worship that I really despise: the announcements. I'm sorry, Mary Kate did as well as one can do with them, but let's face it, it's like one of those Little League outfield fences with all the kind of advertisements on it. It's hard to do announcements well, and so I know this is my problem and not announcements problems, but I can't get my head around them. So I'm going to ask forgiveness for this, and it kind of sets context for my opening story. Because you see, when I was in Wayzata, Minnesota, as a minister on staff there, we had this custom of giving out the Easter offering to some worthy international mission or outreach. And one year, we were going to give the Easter offering, so everybody throws in on that big day of worship, everybody throws in and we give all that we get out to Opportunity International, which is a micro-lending organization and a mission group that deals mostly in Africa but now is open to other places. And it's an exciting thing, but I wasn't excited about the announcement for it. When I hear announcements, I go into my little chair and I sit there and I go to my happy place, right? But on this Sunday, announcements woke me because a man named Ward Brem, who was a firm believer in what Opportunity International does in the world, who was a businessman, entrepreneur in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, was the one who was going to give the announcement. And you know how these usually go. All due respect, usually somebody gets up and says, as you know, we're going to be having the Easter offering go to Opportunity International. Now let me give you a 4-page summary of what Opportunity International does. Right, and you're going. Ward Brem got up and blew my mind. He got up and said, you know, when I tell you that people in Africa live on $1 a day, you probably have one of two responses. Either you feel great pity, or you feel great guilt, or you feel some combination of those two. You either hear that and say, oh, I'm so sad for them, or you hear it and say, I feel so guilty to have what I have, or something between the two. He said, but I'm a businessman. And when I hear that a guy in Africa can live on $1 a day, I think I got to meet that guy because I sure can't, and I need to learn what he knows. Right? Well, I'm sitting back here, and he has done some serious genre bending with announcements to start. He also has done some inclusion bending. Now, that's the other kind of groupie I am. I am an inclusion geek. In fact, on the Strengths Finders, Gallup's instrument that's kind of like Myers-Briggs or the Enneagram, or where they try to figure out what you're strong at in order for staffs and work crews to get better at working with one another. My number one strength out of 36 is includer. It's probably why I do what I do for a living. I am an includer. But when he spoke those words, when I hear that a guy in Africa can get by on $1 a day, I got to meet this guy because I got to learn what he can do, what he knows. He completely flipped my concept of inclusion upside down. Because isn't inclusion supposed to be, and I'll tell you what, 5 areas of my brain light up when I hear whoever you are, wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. My brain is just firing up. And inclusion, at some level for me, is tempted to sometimes become, we're so nice, we're even going to let you in. Right? We're very virtuous people. We're God's favorites, and so we're going to let you come and be one of us. How lucky are you? Right? Inclusion can border on a sort of arrogant, we've got good stuff and you need it, and so come on in because we're nice. But here was Ward saying, no. Inclusion isn't fueled by how good we are. Inclusion is fueled by what we need and don't yet have. Do you see the difference between those two things? The difference between we've got all the good stuff and you're pretty lucky we're going to let you into it on the one hand, and you've got great stuff that we don't have yet, we need you. Wouldn't that make a great outreach campaign at a church? Who's missing here? And we need to go out and find them in the bushes. We need to go out and search everywhere for somebody who has this gift because we don't have it yet. And with that word gift, I'm signaling that in my Bible geek self, as I listen to Ward Brem's announcement, I'm sitting back here and I'm fully awakened now, and I'm thinking 1 Corinthians 12. 1 Corinthians 12, the passage that Matt read first, opens this door to a different kind of inclusion. Did you notice? Everybody gets a gift, and they're all for the common good. And so we're supposed to look around and look for the gift that each person has and appreciate it and welcome it in and have it be a part of the big thing that God is building among us. Now, in Corinth, as Matt suggested, they had some problems. They, as a community, liked one set of gifts and even maybe one gift. They loved ecstasy. They loved to see people who were in ecstatic trances because in their culture, that was a sign that somebody was God-connected. So all these Corinthians are listening to the list and they think, yada, 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 tongues. Right? Yada, 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 tongues. And it's because in the ancient world, in the world they occupied, somebody who spoke in a kind of other language in a trance obviously was connected to God. So picture the little job fair in the Corinthian congregation. You've got prophets and encouragers and teachers and all the people, and then you've got tongue speaker. Everybody is lined up at the tongue speaker line, and nobody's paying any attention to any of the other booths, right? They're all riveted on one gift. And Paul writes this letter and says, you know what, you're missing out on so many things. God is working among you. God has people who can do this and that and this and that. All you can think of is this all day long. Right? 1 Corinthians 12 is Ward Brem-ish. It's invert the inclusion-ish. It's turn my mind around so that I'm looking for the gifts God's giving others out there and I can properly appreciate them. I stop being sort of a we'll let you in guy, and I start being an I need what you have guy. If I live very long in 1 Corinthians 12, and then we transfer over to that body image, and we've got a church that wants a whole lot of eyes and doesn't have any elbows. Right? The whole passage cries out that God is giving us gifts that we aren't even opening. And we're not very good at looking for them. We're not very good at staying vigilant and finding the things that God is giving us. Right? If the mantra of the passage, or if the main essence of the passage, is that our difference is an asset rather than a threat, That the variety among us is a great gift and not something to be chased away from. How does that sit in American culture right now? How are we treating difference in American culture right now? Ellen DeGeneres had an interesting week, right? Ellen DeGeneres has a friend named George W. Bush, and she tweeted out a photo of the two of them and appreciated him as a friend, and she just got killed on Twitter and elsewhere in the blogosphere, on The View. She got, all these different places she got attacked for having a friend who was on the other side of the line. Because in our culture right now, we're pretty allergic to those other people. Now, politics are one way in which we define those other people, and that's the one we're talking about mostly this weekend, but we've got a lot of other people-ish ways of defining folks, and our approach to the world is that the people who are like us are worth meeting and knowing and befriending, but the people who are like them are not. In other words, we're going to give up the half of the population in which God has nested gifts and say, we aren't even going to look over there. Right? During the times in the history of the church when people have debated whether women ought to be ministers, we have a blessing of having 2 women ministers among us this morning. Wave to the people. Right? During those times, the proper sort of powerful response to people who would shut that down has been, you mean you're going to give up half of humanity's giftedness and not listen to the half of people who are going to be brilliant teachers and preachers? You're going to eliminate a whole half of the human race as an asset? In our political circumstances, we're tending to do the same thing. This weekend on Saturday, we ran across a Pew Research Center statistic that was just astonishing. Pew Center does all these surveys. You've probably accessed them at some time or another. And they did one in which they asked Democrats how they perceived Republicans and Republicans how they perceived Democrats. And they asked things like, okay, Republican, are Democrats patriotic? Are Democrats industrious? Are they lazy? All these different questions about how they saw Democrats, and they asked the same thing of the Democrats in reverse. Okay, Democrats, are Republicans patriotic? Are they, right? So they asked to characterize the other side. And we were especially alarmed by 2 sets of answers. See, everybody in this survey was asked, is the other side moral? And in another line, is the other side intelligent? And the answers from right and left for both of those questions were in the low single digits for percentage. In other words, Republicans answered, when asked, are Democrats moral? 2% of them said yes. When Democrats were asked, are Republicans moral? 3% of them said yes. When they were asked, are they intelligent? 4% said yes. 5%. We believe that the other side is stupid and evil. Right? How long are you going to look at people who are stupid and evil asking, what gifts do they bring? You're not going to look very long. The great philosopher of Germany, Schopenhauer, in his aesthetic theory, said this, and it's going to sound kind of opaque at the beginning, but let's unpack it together. He said, once I have identified something as red, I've stopped looking at it. He's an aesthetic theorist, and he's trying to get at, you should keep looking because this red is different than that red, which is different from this. You can keep appreciating things, but if you've labeled it red, you're gone. You and I live in a culture that tends toward that kind of dismissiveness, that tends to say, oh, I know all those people because they voted for that person. Right? We tend to dismiss out of hand and assume that we know things that disqualify them from being able to bring gifts into our conversation or into our lives. So if Paul's 1 Corinthians 12 calls us to look for gifts, our culture is saying we will in our tribe. The Bible has flyover passages. How many of you like the fact that Iowans get called a flyover state? Don't you love that? We moved from Connecticut to Seattle flying over, and then finally our family moved to Minneapolis, St. Paul, and we were suddenly flyover people. And I remember just kind of realizing all those years that I had looked at the mid-states as sort of lesser, and it was an offense to me that I had done that, but also an offense when people called us flyover states. There are flyover states, and there are flyover passages in the Bible. How many of you have ever sat down to read the Bible, and you get going, and suddenly you reach, so-and-so begat so-and-so, and then so-and-so begat so-and-so, and it lasts for pages. The only usefulness there, by the way, is if you're ever in a memorization, biblical memorization mode, Adam, Seth, Enosh is a book, is one verse. You get credit for Adam, Seth, Enosh. You heard it here first. If you want credit in heaven for one Bible verse, Adam, Seth, Enosh. But that's about all you get out of it, right? We fly over those, and we fly over passages like the one that Matt read second today. That piece from Luke chapter 6, where Jesus just calls his disciples, and Luke names who they are. Have you ever sat and gotten to the deep spiritual sense of that passage in a Bible study? Let's reflect on the name Peter again. It brings such spiritual warmth, and James, that's quite a name. It doesn't yield a lot, right? But I want to break that one down, because I want to see it as an HR decision in Jesus' life. Because when we encounter Jesus in Luke chapter 6, he has become some kind of amalgam of Elvis and Tiger Woods and Lady Gaga and the latest Apple project, right? Latest iPhone, right? People line up to see Jesus. The way that the gospel writers portray it, the beaches are so full of people who want to hear him and touch him and see him that he has to get out in a little rowboat so he can preach to them. Sometimes he can't even get food because he's so clenched in. Jesus is a rock star, literally. And so when the time comes for him to say, you know what, I need to make a little staff here, I need to gather an inner circle, he has to ask himself, whom do I want in this inner circle? I'm going to use 12 seats for this place. I'm going to have a team of 12. And he starts to conjure, goes up even to pray before he calls them. And then he sits down in chapter 6 and says, here they are. You are the 12. And you know what he uses 2 of those seats for? He uses one for a guy named Matthew, also sometimes called Levi, who is a Roman revenue agent. Now, these people are Jews who live in the Roman Empire under Roman rule, kind of suppressed by Roman rule, right? This guy is a Roman revenue agent, a tax collector. He uses another of those seats to call a guy named Simon the Zealot. Now, a zealot is a Jewish revolutionary who wants to overthrow Rome. Any of you seen Monty Python's Life of Brian? Right? It's that little huddled group that's plotting revolution in the basement and never quite gets around to it, but it's plotting revolution in the basement. Simon is in that room plotting revolution. How are they going to overthrow Rome? Because they're feeling suppressed and oppressed, and they want to get... Could you think of 2 people who would be more politically opposite than those 2? But there they are on a list of 12. He had 12 seats, and he put polarization in play right in the midst of them. Why in the world would Jesus do that? Well, he might have done it just to show off. If he can keep these 2 people together, he must be really something. But I wonder if it's not more like Doris Kearns Goodwin's Team of Rivals. Have any of you read that biography of Lincoln? It's a great, thick thing, but in which she chronicles Lincoln's instinct to get to some people who disagree in the room so they could come up with better policy. Team of Rivals, maybe that's what Jesus was up to. What we know from those choices is that Jesus didn't disqualify half of the people of the Jews. Jesus didn't say, well, I'm with the Roman sympathizers and those other people, they got nothing to offer. or I'm with the overthrow people and those other people, they've got nothing to offer. He put both voices in the room because he recognized that there were gifts in both people, and maybe even gifts in both voices. Friends, we live in a time that sees difference as a threat and flees into safe echo chamber spaces in order to avoid having to talk to those people. We live in a time where giftedness has to be on our half, our tribe, our side. And Paul and Jesus, with one voice, call out to us and say there's a better way. Paul and Jesus, in harmony, cry out to us that God has given us gifts all the way across the human community, that the people who disagree with us may be our gift in their disagreement. Jesus and Paul join in chorus to challenge our prevailing culture and call us to one another across our difference because it benefits us and God's work in the world. I want to close by imagining together what it might feel like to be one of those disciples. Maybe you've tried to picture yourself on a beach fixing your nets, or in a tax booth doing what you do, or just walking along and having Jesus come up. The song that the kids sang earlier has to do with the calling of these disciples and how they serve different functions, right? But I want you to imagine Jesus, in whatever form you picture him, walking up to you amidst a crowd and singling you out and saying, hey, I need you to follow me because we need what you've got. First off, what does he need of you? What do we need of you? Paul calls that your gift for the common good. But after you're done with that imagination process, I want you to shift and now picture him walking up to the one you think least likely to be one of his favorites and saying the same thing. Picture Jesus walking up to somebody you long ago stopped listening to and saying, I need you to follow me because we need what you have. Friends, when we can get to those two imagination projects, when we can realize that Jesus is calling us to bring the good we have and calling each of the people we may have disqualified to bring the good they have, we are halfway home. Because the kingdom of God, the reign of God, the world of God is a place full of blessed and gifted variety, and we aren't even opening half of it. What do you say we open it? Amen and amen.